Hello everyone, it's Friday and you're watching Within the Frame, where we delve deeper into the top stories not only in South Korea but across the globe. I'm Kim Bo-kyung. Drug overdoses are causing horrific scenes on U.S. streets and are currently the leading cause of accidental deaths in the United States. South Korea, once a drug-free country too, is seeing encroaching danger of illicit drug use, with several celebrities and some younger members of large conglomerate families being indicted on charges related to habitual use and selling of drugs. Why are people getting addicted to drugs? What impact do these drugs have on our bodies, and what kind of administrative and individual efforts do we need to prevent our close ones from getting addicted to them? For an in-depth analysis, we invited Dr. Won Eun-soo, psychiatrist. Dr. Won, welcome to the show.
Hello.
Hello. And we also have Michael Brown, Global Director of Counter-Narcotics Technology at Rigaku Analytical Devices, joining live from Washington, D.C. Michael, welcome, and thank you for your time.
Good morning, and thank you.
All right, Dr. Won, first question to you. Police said recently that it is planning to question famous South Korean actor Yoo Ah-in for his alleged use of Propofol. We have already heard of this powerful anesthetic being used by many celebrities, but we do not know well how it works. How does it affect our body, and how do people get their hands on it?
Well, as you all know, Propofol is an intravenous hypnotic medication extensively used for anesthesia and sedation. So it's mainly prescribed for medical procedures. It has several advantages over other sedatives due to its rapid onset, short duration of action, faster metabolism, and rapid clearance. Propofol's principal mechanism of action is to enhance the chloride current at the GABA receptor. But why it may become so addictive is because it also works on our mesolimbic system of the brain. Our mesolimbic system mediates our responses to natural rewards like food and happy moments, and Propofol increases dopamine levels in this area, which can induce pleasurable sensations. It can also induce other psychotropic effects in sub-anesthetic doses, inducing feelings of being drunk, dizzy, elated, and decreased feelings of being in control over one's body. So self-reported reasons for Propofol use include seeking euphoria and alleviating anxiety and insomnia. So the pleasant feelings induced by Propofol can increase the risk for recreational use and addiction of Propofol. It was reported to be one of the most commonly abused substances among healthcare professionals with access to the drug. And the risk of its abuse in the general population has also been highlighted in numerous recent case studies.
Right, I see. Now, Michael, the drug issue is not just South Korea's own problem, actually. According to one U.S. congressman, fentanyl has become the leading cause of death among adults aged between 18 to 45. I wonder what the fentanyl is and how is it causing so many people to die?
Well, at least here in the United States, the fentanyl we see today in America is clandestinely manufactured in Mexico by the cartels as a synthetic opioid that is at least 50 times stronger than heroin. Now, trafficking groups are using two different marketing strategies that have proven to be deadly in the United States. One includes lacing drugs such as heroin with fentanyl to increase its potency. The other disguises fentanyl as legally prescribed pills such as Oxycontin. Now, the cartels have created distribution networks that supply millions of fake pills to thousands of unsuspecting individuals, resulting in their sudden death. Now, even the smallest trace of fentanyl, like 2 milligrams, is enough to kill individuals within seconds.
Wow, very dangerous. Now, Dr. Won, then what are the risk factors of developing the drug addiction?
Well, people of any age, sex, or economic status can become addicted to a drug, but certain factors can affect the likelihood and speed of developing an addiction. If you have a mental health condition, such as depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, ADHD, etc., you may be prone to developing an addiction. Using drugs can become a way of coping with painful feelings such as anxiety and loneliness, but eventually it can make these problems worse. And some drugs, such as stimulants, cocaine, or opioid painkillers, may result in a faster development of addiction compared to other substances. So they are considered to be highly addictive drugs. The form of intake, such as smoking or injecting, can also increase the potential for addiction. And family history of addiction is also an important risk factor. Drug addiction is more common in some families and likely involves an increased risk based on genes and modeling of behavior. So if you have a blood relative, such as a parent, with alcohol or drug addiction, you're at greater risk of developing an addiction yourself.
Right, I see. Now, Michael, I wonder now, how do people in the United States or other nations, of course, usually get the hold of, drugs in general?
Well, illicit drug trafficking and substance use in America has been occurring for many years, but fentanyl has ushered in a new era of deadly drug use. Now, the United States, as well as other countries, have been fighting against transnational organized crime groups like the Sinaloa or Jalisco drug trafficking cartel based in Mexico for years. Now, they have been able to flood the world market, not just the United States, but the world market with cheap, high-purity narcotics such as heroin, methamphetamine, and now, of course, fentanyl. Well, unfortunately, the availability of hard narcotics in the United States has become easier and cheaper to obtain. Now, this is largely due in part to the ability of the cartels, and this is really the important part, to acquire the essential precursor chemicals required to mass produce and distribute fentanyl throughout the United States as well as the global markets. So again, we look at the gravity, the center of gravity for the cartels, what is their most important capability when we talk about global narcotics distribution? And that is their ability, right, to acquire the essential precursors required to mass produce, hundreds of pounds of fentanyl powder and millions of fentanyl pills, which they can then, as I said earlier, distribute easily throughout the global market.
Right. Reflecting on what Michael said, I can really see how this is a transboundary issue right now, a global issue that is. But before we tap on the international efforts that we need for that, Dr. Won, I'd like to ask you, another problem is a rising number of drug offenses, particularly among young people. How are people getting to know about these drugs in the first place, and what is driving the increase in the number of drug offenders under the age of 30?
Well, young people often want to try new experiences, especially ones that they think are thrilling or daring. The brain doesn't finish developing until the early 20s, so the capability for rational decision-making, self-control and judgment aren't fully operated yet. That's why the young are more prone to trying risky and daring activities. They have more opportunities to be exposed to party drugs, which are substances that are commonly used at house parties, bars, nightclubs, etc. Peer pressure is a strong factor in starting to use drugs, particularly for the young. And the lack of education also plays a part. Some adolescents and young adults grow up thinking drug and alcohol use is normal. Their favorite musicians are singing about it. The movies are glamorizing it. And many don't understand the consequences of drug use and how it can severely harm their minds and bodies and relationships. Lack of family involvement, difficult family situations, or problematic bonding with parents may increase the risk of addiction, as can a lack of parental supervision. And using drugs at an early age can severely impact the developing brain and cause changes which increase the biological likelihood of progressing to drug addiction.
Right, so a lot of factors are affecting our, young people to fall into such type of addiction. Now, Michael, President Biden even mentioned the soaring drug-related deaths in the United States in his recent State of the Union address, which will surely attract attention to how the administration deals with the drug issue. How is the United States trying to tackle this problem?
Well, it's a major problem, as I'm sure you're aware, for the United States. And one of the major, what we call lines of effort initiated by the Biden administration was the Save America from the Fentanyl Emergency Act of 2022. Now, this legislation was important because it scheduled all current and future fentanyl-related substances as a Schedule I drug, thus ensuring that law enforcement could continue to prosecute those involved in its distribution. Now, this is important because the cartels are continuously combining new substances with fentanyl to increase its potency. So in other words, instead of having to spend 18 months to a year or more to try and schedule a new substance, President Biden's administration created a blanket coverage, you could say, a blanket coverage law that now includes all new substances that would fall under that clause. And the administration also made a $125 billion federal investment to include or improve drug prevention, treatment, drug recovery services, especially related to fentanyl. I mean, this is absolutely critical. The post-care related to addiction is one of the finer points that this administration has taken an effort to improve, because we're seeing so many people, addicted to fentanyl. Roughly 300 people a day are dying related to fentanyl. So recovery efforts, must be improved to kind of curb the addiction rates that we're seeing in the United States.
Right. I see how Biden administration is trying to deal with this drug-related issues. But like you said before, Michael, the problem of fentanyl and synthetic drugs is not limited exclusively to the U.S. or Mexico, but rather it is a global problem because of the international market, right? In what way is this a global problem, and what kind of international efforts do you believe are needed to combat the drug issue?
Well, the Mexican cartels have a very well-established and well-entrenched international drug supply network for narcotics that include, of course, fentanyl. Now, this happens to be one of the most potent and, unfortunately, one of the most deadly drugs that can kill you in seconds. And just to give you an example of the outreach capability of the cartels, recently there was a large shipment of fentanyl sent from Canada to Australia. Now, I suspect that one of the Mexican cartels are attempting to establish Canada as a central distribution hub for the international market. Now, this could represent a significant narcotics threat to Canada, as well as other countries, right, as the cartels continue to expand their reach beyond the United States to include Australia, Southeast Asia, and Europe. The cartels are already in many of these countries already, supplying heroin, cocaine, and methamphetamine. So fentanyl is simply just another commodity that they will include to the long list of narcotics that are being distributed. But as I said earlier, fentanyl has changed the game, because now there's a drug out there that can kill you within 30 minutes of ingesting it.
Wow, 30 minutes after ingesting it is really tough to just even by hearing it. Dr. Won, administrative efforts by the government, of course, is very important, but I believe what is also important is whether knowing whether your close ones are suffering from drug addiction in order to help them out. Now, are there any signs we could look out to find out whether my close friends or families are suffering from any type of drug addiction?
Well, yes, if they start to have problems at school or work, frequently missing classes or work days, or a sudden disinterest in activities, or a drop in grades or work performance, physical health issues, they seem to have lack of energy and motivation, sudden weight loss or gain, or frequently having red eyes. A neglected appearance with a lack of interest in clothing, grooming, or looks, and changes in behavior, such as being unnecessarily secretive about what they're doing in their own time, or drastic changes in the way they interact with family and friends. They may seem emotionally unstable with extreme anxiety or angry outbursts. Also, money issues, sudden requests for money without a reasonable explanation. These all can be red flags.
Right. I would also have to try to find out whether there are any of my friends who are waving their red flags right now. But Dr. Won, one more question to you. Recognition is a very important pillar, but another is access to treatment, like our Michael said, the recovery efforts. Is there adequate access to rehabilitation or treatment facilities in South Korea right now, and are they well operated?
Well, the Ministry of Health and Welfare has designated 21 medical institutions as medical treatment and protection facilities for individuals suffering from drug abuse and addiction. And there are approximately 50 addiction management community centers throughout the country, which offer a variety of services. However, concerns are being raised that there is a serious lack in resources concerning the treatment and rehabilitation of substance addiction in South Korea. For the treatment of addiction, not only does the individual need detox of all substances, which can take weeks, but some parts of our brain take much longer to recover. Physical addiction appears to occur when repeated use of a drug changes the way your brain feels pleasure. The drug causes physical changes to the nerve cells in your brain and the way they communicate through neurotransmitters. And these changes can remain long after you stop using the drug. And how long it takes for the brain to heal from addiction depends on your age, the age you started using the drugs you used and the amount you used. But in general, it's considered to take several months to over a year for your brain to completely rewire and normalize to a pre-addictive state. So during that lengthy period, individuals need resources to support their recovery. For instance, resources that enable them to treat not just the addiction itself, but also the underlying causes that had contributed to the development of the addiction in the first place, such as depression. And in order for the thousands of people affected by drug abuse and addiction in South Korea to get proper treatment, changes in national policies and budgets seem inevitable.
Right. Given on what our experts said, I think we need to touch upon very many aspects and sectors to deal with this problem. But Michael, as a former DEA agent, I'd like to ask you, what do you believe is key to preventing people from being exposed to drugs? And in your opinion, what should countries take into consideration the most when dealing with this problem?
You know, I was going to mention, I recently retired from DEA after about 32 years of service, in which I spent about 15 years working in foreign countries. And I have to say that what we can do now, right, we're putting a lot of focus on drug enforcement, but we need to put greater focus on drug prevention, which is just a matter of increasing public messaging and education, especially for our children and our young adults, about the dangers of drug use, with a specific focus now on fentanyl. Because as DEA's public messaging campaign states, one pill can kill, and it's killing about 300 people a day in the United States, which equates to about 8,000 people a month, if the math is correct. And this is simply the cartels, right, taking the lives of individuals. We look at fentanyl as the problem. The cartels are really the center of gravity from which that problem emanates. But again, we need better public messaging, especially when we're talking about these fake prescription pills. One thinks they're taking an Oxycontin or an Adderall or a Percocet, and it is actually a fentanyl pill, which can kill, as I said earlier, within 30 seconds. Shortly after ingesting it, respiratory failure can follow, resulting in the death of that individual. So again, I think all countries need a greater emphasis on public messaging, starting at the schools, the grades, lower school levels, middle schools, and then, of course, into colleges, because this is a problem that we're not going to outgrow, right? It's not a problem that's going to be solved tomorrow. So in the meantime, we need to get our children, especially our children, because they represent, in my opinion, the vulnerable class of individuals who are really dying at alarming rates today.
Right, I see. Now, Dr. Won, South Korea also was once considered a drug-free country, but now it seems like it has lost that label. What does Seoul need to do to regain its reputation?
Well, like I've mentioned, the current kind of opinion is the budget set to concentrate on drug problems is set too low. There was a lot of people saying that. So increasing the budget and strengthening the treatment facilities, rehabilitation services for people who need them is also important. And I personally think that education, I think the general population is still not fully aware of how dangerous these substances and addiction can be. So I think education is very, very important.
Right, so increasing the budget and education to let everybody know that drug addiction could be very lethal and very harmful to our bodies. Right. Unfortunately, this is all the time we have for today's edition, but thank you, Dr. Won and Michael, for letting our viewers better understand the risks of illegal drug use and how to recognize the signs of drug addiction. We really appreciate your insights.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that's all for Within the Frame tonight. We will be back next Monday with more in-depth stories. Enjoy the weekend and goodbye.